Guten Morgen allerseits. Nein, nein. Lass uns nach vorn versuchen. Guten Morgen allerseits. Perfekt. Mein Name ist Donovan Brown, Principal DevOps Manager für Microsoft. Vielen Dank für den Beitritt zu mir heute Morgen. Jetzt spreche ich Englisch, danke. If you follow me on Twitter, and you can using that QR code, you know that I almost did not make it here today. My first flight was so delayed that I was going to miss my connection. So I rebooked on another airline who decided to lose my luggage. So I had to shop in an airport. But those that know me know I'm just not me without a black shirt. And I couldn't find one. But luckily, the Azure Saturday team had my back. So I am now here, ready to rub a little DevOps on it and make it all better. So we're going to have some fun today. I just built a team, which you can see at the bottom here. I could not be prouder of the people I was able to actually get to come join Microsoft so that they can help me come around the world and just spread the joy that is DevOps with Microsoft Platform. And I'm going to show it to you here today. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to do my favorite demo, which I call Zero to DevOps. But before we can go from zero to DevOps, we have to agree on what DevOps actually is. Okay, so we're going to talk about what DevOps is, and then I'm going to take you through our tools and try to wow you from going from nothing to an entire DevOps pipeline. I have no code, I have no projects, I have absolutely nothing. And then I'm going to build an entire pipeline right here in front of you so that you're going to be able to go back on work, Montag, and you're going to fix this for your companies. You're not going to have to go ask for permission. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So what is DevOps? If you ask me, DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. Value is the most important word. We are not trying to deliver software. We are trying to deliver value. Okay? Value can be delivered without changing a single line of your application. If Cyber Monday's on its way and you need to be able to sustain more simultaneous users, you don't have to change your app. You can have your ops guys scale up or scale out your infrastructure, and you can deliver value to your end users. The most difficult part of this sentence are the people. I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to show you stuff like continuous integration, continuous delivery. I'm going to show you about infrastructure as code, and you're all going to be like, yeah, that's freaking awesome. I'm going to say, are you guys doing this at work? And you're like, no, we're not doing any of this. I'm like, why not? Because the people in my organization like the way that we've been doing it for the last 20 years, or the last 30 years. And they think that's the way that it's supposed to be done. The people don't get it. And all the people have to get it. Not just dev, not just ops. Marketing, business, QA, everyone has to understand that if we don't do this, we lose. The time to debate on DevOps is over. You either implement DevOps or you lose. It's clear. Ask Blockbuster about Netflix. Ask the taxi industry about Uber. Ask the bookstores about Amazon. Right? These are companies that were completely displaced, run out of business by other companies who were using software as a strategic advantage, who were moving as fast as they possibly could. So this is what's important to us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some really cool products today. So cool, in fact, that I believe that they're going to help you persuade some of those stubborn people who don't want to change the way that they do their work today. Okay? So why do it? Because your competition is already doing it. And if you don't do it and they do, your customers become their customers. And getting them back is almost impossible. Think about the mobile world, which I think is the most fiercely competitive world there is right now. For every app that you think you want to write, there's at least half a dozen that already do that exact same thing. And your customers are just waiting for you to make a mistake. They're going to uninstall it, give you a 1-star rating, and go to the next person, and they'll never be back again. You have to innovate. You have to disrupt. To do that, you have to move much faster than you do today. But you also have to reduce the downtime, which usually goes against each other. Because what happens is we have people who want to move faster, so they incur more risk, which means you normally incur more downtime. But how can you actually do both? Through automation. If I automate what humans used to do, then all of a sudden I can do things faster and more reliably. Never, ever send a human being to do a machine's job. Ever. And what I'm going to do is show you how we can actually minimize that. There are times human beings need to be involved, and I'll show you how we're going to control that for you as well. This is the most important slide that I have been showing. I have been in Europe since, May. I don't go home until July, spreading the message of Visual Studio Team Services and our DevOps offering. But what most people don't realize is that it works for any language targeting any platform. Yes, I'll be doing .NET today, but I can do this exact same demo using Eclipse and Java, or Visual Studio Code and Node.js. Whatever languages you want to program in, and that also means whatever other languages you use in your organization, they can all be using the tools that I'm going to show you today, the best practices that I'm going to be showing you today, regardless if they're writing a fat client, mobile client, Docker, does not matter. All of this applies. The tools that we're going to be using today, actually we're going to be using Visual Studio Team Services, but it has a twin brother called Team Foundation Server. One of them you install yourself on premise, the other one we host for you in the cloud. For those of you who are scared of the cloud, you can install it yourself and maintain it. Once you wake up, you can go to Visual Studio Team Services and use it in the cloud the way you're supposed to, okay? But we understand there are legitimate reasons not to put it in the cloud. You have the military, you have medical, you have people who are a little afraid of it. So it's the same product, but it's 3 months behind the one on the right. What I mean by that is every 3 weeks, we update Visual Studio Team Services with new functions, new features. Every 3 months, we package up the last 3 months worth of features and we push them down to the on-prem product. Visual Studio Team Services is everything that you know and love about TFS with none of the maintenance. It is everything that you need to turn an idea into a working piece of software. Everything. You don't need a different product for version control and then a different product for build and a different product for release and a different product for bug tracking and a different product for test case management and a different product for infrastructure as code. You don't need all that stuff. There was a time that's how you had to build your DevOps pipeline because no single vendor had everything that you needed. And finally, that's no longer the case. Now, don't fear vendor lock-in. I know what some of you guys are thinking. No, I've been down this road with Microsoft before. I tried it in 2005, and man, oh man, was that a beating. I apologize for the 2005 version, and the 8, and the 10, and the 12, and the 13. But I'm not apologizing anymore. Since 15, it's actually been pretty awesome. And I'm going to be showing you the 2017 version today, so it's even better. And what's also cool about our tool set is that you're no longer locked into it. If any part of it you don't like, you can actually replace it with the tool of your choice, and the rest of it still works. It's not like it used to be, okay? So I'm done talking. I want to show you how cool the stuff is that we have here at Microsoft and how you can apply it to everyone. So what I have to prove now, I always feel like a magician when I do this particular demo because I need to make sure you understand that I have absolutely nothing. So here I am saying that there's no rabbit already in the hat, right? I have nothing running but PowerPoint at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to my Team Services account and to my Azure account to show that I don't have anything there already. So let's go ahead and fire up a web browser here. This is my Team Services account. Everyone watching can go to visualstudio.com right now and create one of these for absolutely free. It costs $0 and 0 cents for you and 4 of your buddies to go start a startup. Right? We will not charge you for these tools. You just use them. And I don't even have a project in this one. This one is completely clean. Now, where I'm going to be deploying to is Azure. So what I'm going to do is actually bring up my Azure portal as well and show you that what I'm going to create does not already exist. Because again, I don't want to cheat. I want you to understand that there is nothing already there. So inside of my Azure account, what will exist in a moment is a resource group called End-to-End Demo. So I'm searching for it right now. As you can see, there is no resource group called End-to-End Demo. I have nothing. So let's see how quickly I can build an entire DevOps pipeline, okay? So let's go back and start by creating my actual team project. A team project is where we're going to store our builds, our test cases, our bugs, our source control, the whole 9 yards. While that's building, let's talk about some of the other items there. You saw it said source control, and it gives me options. I could have chosen Git or TFVC. TFVC is basically for those using VSS today who know how to get latest, check in, check out. It's the exact same thing, but it's enterprise grade. For those who are brave enough to go to Git, we offer Git for you as well. One cool thing about our Git is it's absolutely free. Unlimited private repos for $0. So you don't have to pay for your private repos. So if you're paying for them today, you can literally go back tomorrow and start saving yourself some money. We also had an option there to choose a process. It said, I selected Agile, but you can use Scrum or you can use CMMI. CMMI is code word for waterfall, so we don't have to shame you in front of your friends. You can pick that one and not let everyone know you're still waterfall. But it is a waterfall template, okay? So remember I said you can get started for free? You can, and here is a really cool feature to where if you have a paid Git repository, just give us the URL. We'll literally run over there, grab all of the history and bring it over here for you, and you can shut down the other one and stop paying that bill. It is simply that easy. But I'm starting from scratch, so I'm not even going to go and get existing code. What I'm going to do is basically have it prime my repository for me. There's nothing in it. It's absolutely empty. But what I do want in there is at least a README file. And the README file is just like you would see at GitHub. You go to GitHub, there's a README file that explains what's happening in that project. I've just created one as well. I can modify this and tell my team members exactly what this repository is for. Now that I have code or a repository, I love the way that team services guide you through the right thing to do. I created a project, it asked me for a repository. It helped me create the repository, now it's asking me for a build. And some people think that's premature to create a build, but it's not. I don't need source code to create a build. I don't even need source code to create a release. If I know what I'm building and I know how I'm going to release it, I can literally build the entire pipeline before I have a single line of code. Well, we're going to go ahead and follow its instructions. And it says, let's go ahead and set up a build. Our new build system is freaking awesome, right? So again, don't be fearful of everything that you've seen from 2013, because first it was MS Build. And I remember I mastered MS Build the day that they switched it to XAML. So I was like, I just learned the old one, and now I have to learn something new. And that was so intimidating, because if you didn't know XAML workflows, it was a nightmare. Well, it wasn't a nightmare for me so much because I was a consultant, and it was actually a really good moneymaker for me because no one else could figure it out. So I got paid lots of money to go fix your XAML builds for you. But it was bad for the customer because they were locked into Donovan Brown for the rest of their lives because I had bastardized their build so bad that they couldn't figure out what was going on. The build system I'm about to show you is the build system we should have created from the very beginning. We learned from our mistakes. We looked at what the competitors were doing, and we had to come up with a much simpler, open, flexible build system. So if you'll notice here, one of the things that jumps out at people is they'll see Android, they'll see Ant, they'll see Gradle, Jenkins, Maven, Node, Xamarin, Xcode, stuff you would not expect Microsoft to know anything about. Not only do we understand what they are, we can actually build them for you right out of the box. Our build agent runs natively on Linux, on Mac, and on Windows. So wherever you want to build your code, we're already on that platform, ready to help you build it immediately. These are just templates. These templates allow you to just get started very, very quickly. We've already figured out all the tasks you need. We already have all the proper defaults. You click on one of these and you're ready to rock and roll. So what we're doing is a web application in ASP.NET. So we're simply going to choose this one. I'm actually done. I could literally click save. This will successfully build whatever code that I produce and actually package it for me as a web app. But there's some cool stuff that I can actually do. So let's talk about that. First off is this little flag here. Remember I said we updated every 3 weeks? We even update the task faster than that, which means that this template was built with an older version of that task, and the task is saying, hey, there's a new version of me, but I'm not going to force it upon you, because if I do, I could potentially break your build. By actually letting you know about it, you can then add it to your build if you want to, and then we'll lock that version in so that even if I upgrade it outside of that, your build will continue to work perfectly. Okay, so that's what we're doing here, but since I haven't built anything, let's go ahead and upgrade it to the latest version of this task. Another thing that's really nice is our test task here. We can actually run only the impacted test. This is using test impact analysis. As we run your unit test, we analyze which lines of the actual application are tested by that unit test. We then keep that information and we analyze which lines of code you've changed in your next commit. We can then use that, refer to that database and say, there's only a subset of your unit tests that I need to run because those are the ones that exercise the code that you changed. So when you have thousands and thousands of unit tests, sometimes it can take a long time to run them. But now it won't, because it only runs the tests that you need to be run based on the code changes that you've made. Another thing that can speed up your build is actually creating a really, really big build machine. I'm very fortunate that I work for Microsoft, so I have this cool Azure account that I never see the bill for. So I build like crazy big machines in there. And I get my hand slapped every once in a while, but my build machine is freaking awesome. 28 gigs of RAM. I forget how many cores it has on there. It's a beast of a machine. So I love building against it. And because it has so many cores, my unit tests don't take any time at all to run because I can parallelize them across all the cores of that box. You can do this too without having to pay in Azure by this. I'll give you a little secret here. My favorite build agents ever are what we call private build agents. Private build agent is when you take our agent and you put it on any machine in the world that you want, even an old machine in your current data center, right? It can be on-premise. And then you register that to us in VSTS, and we don't charge you for that. And you can build on there as much as you possibly want. So if you don't have the Uber Azure account that I have, go find one of the old servers in your data center that would make a hellified build machine and use that instead, and don't have to pay the bill either. Another thing that I like to do is code coverage. I am a huge, huge fan of code coverage, and by simply checking that box, it is now going to calculate the code coverage for me against my build. So now I'm just going to save this, now that I've made some changes to it, and now I need some work. And remember, I said team services is everything that you need. So not only do I have a source repository, and now I have a CI build, I can actually come over here and actually create some work for myself. The work is going to be on a product backlog. For the non-Agilists in the room, a product backlog is a laundry list of any and everything that you want your product to do, and it should be in priority order, which means the most important things are up at the top. You work on those most important things, and as soon as you see value, you're able to ship the product. Not like waterfall, where you have to basically get to the end of all the requirements. The entire product has to be done before you ever ship it. Agile changes that drastically. As soon as there's value, you ship it. And then you keep adding value over time, which is really nice. What I love about this particular screen here is at the end of every sprint of a Scrum team, you're supposed to have something called a sprint review. A sprint review is where the team gets up and it demos to all the stakeholders and the product owner all the value that they added in the previous sprint. As the Scrum Master, I sit in the back of the room and I have this screen up. The reason why is because the stakeholders and the product owners have great feedback during those meetings. And I want to make sure I have a quick way to capturing it. Every time a cool idea blurts out, I just come over here, I type in the cool idea, and then I press enter. I capture all the ideas during the meeting. Then I sit down with my product owner afterwards, and we simply drag and drop them to reprioritize them to make sure the most important things are at the top. Once we have it in priority order, I allow my dev teams to go and attack those work items and break them down for me. And they can do it right here from the board. So I can say, you know what, to do this, I'm going to need a release. So I can create another task that is a child of that particular product backlog item, and I can visualize it right here on my product backlog. Once I have it all broken down, sometimes I have to go back and reprioritize things. Because your manager thinks it's the most important thing in the world until they see how expensive it is. Then they're like, well, I didn't know it was going to take that long. I really have these 5 little things and that one big thing. So I love to have this hierarchy so they can see exactly the cost and make sure that the priorities are the way that they think it is. Okay? Not everybody likes product backlogs. A lot of people want to start doing Kanban. And Kanban is something that we've started to take very seriously at Microsoft. And we've built what I believe to be one of the most customizable Kanban boards in the world. I'll tell you a little secret on why I think this Kanban board is so good. Internally at Microsoft, we do these things called bake-offs. A bake-off is where a guy like myself pitches the Visual Studio product with all my heart and try to show you how good it is. And then we have another internal Microsoft person go and learn a competitor's product just as well as I know this product. And they pitch it against me. And we basically see how did our product stand up against our competitor's product. The first time I did this, I got annihilated, right? And this is where I got beat up the most. What was so empowering about that meeting was it infuriated so many people at Microsoft. We were so upset that we got beaten that we went off and started innovating like never before. This is the most customizable Kanban board I've ever seen. You can customize the lanes, you can split them in half, change the colors, add expedited lanes, the whole 9 yards because of what our competitors were doing. And now they can't even keep up with us, right? So just a little hint for you as well. Compare yourself against your competitors. You get a lot of cool ideas. This one we had ourselves. We can actually continue to break down items right here on the Kanban board, so I don't have to jump back and forth. I can even prioritize the task here so that I don't have to move back and forth again. Another thing that I like is when I drag and drop this, it automatically assigns it to me. And then the coolest part is now that I'm using Git, every single time I work on a product backlog item, it should be in its own branch, right? If you know Git, it basically equals branch. Right? Everything should be branched. Even if it doesn't need to be branched, you branch it, and then we're going to figure out how to merge it back in later, right? But what's really cool here is I don't have to leave to create the branch. I can say, you know what? I want to create a branch for this work item, and here it is right here. Let's create yourself a branch. How many of you guys are using Git already? How many of you have more branches than you know what to do with? And you have branches that you don't even know what they're for anymore. Everyone raise your hands again, right? Because if you're using Git, you have temp 1, temp 2, temp 3. You have no idea what's inside of there. What's really cool about this, when I create the branch, I actually get to associate the actual work items for why I'm creating the branch. So even if I have a bad name, I can always look at the anatomy of the branch and see this is why I created it. This is what we were actually working on. And I'll show you some cool stuff that we do to help you clean up your branches as well. So now all I have to do is give it a name. I'll call it init. It knows exactly why I'm creating it, and I create my branch. Now, what you would normally have to do is drop to the command line and figure out how in the world do you check out a branch. Because I did a clone, but I don't see the branch that I need. And then you got to go and do some researching, and you got to go Google stuff with Bing until you figure out that, oh, I got to check it out too, even though I've already cloned it and all that kind of nonsense, right? So I hate Git personally. I think it's the worst thing that's ever been invented. But we understand that you guys like it, right? So we gave it to you. But this is what we decided to do. Instead of making it the horrific experience that it normally is when you have to go to the command line and figure out if it's a rebase or a clone or a checkout or whatever the hell else you got to do with Git, what we said is, how do we give them the power of Git but never have them look at a command line? And that's what I'm going to show you. All the power that you know and love about Git without ever having to drop to a command line to use it. Don't fear. For all you guys who love the command line in PowerShell, you can go right down there and type all the stuff you want to type. It all works exactly the same. But if you don't ever want to have to see that, you don't have to. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Up here it says clone. And it shows me this here, so I can drop down to the command line like a man and go do it the hard way. Or I can just come over here, and we actually have all these different IDEs that we already know how to clone your repo into for you. So again, when I said any language, any platform, this helps me prove it. It's not just Visual Studio. I can do this exact demo with Eclipse, and it will reach down onto my machine, fire up Eclipse, and clone my repository for me. But today, we're going to be playing inside of Visual Studio, so let's go ahead and do Visual Studio. Now, not only did it open up Visual Studio on my machine for me, it's doing a little bit more than that. It's not just going to clone my repository. It is literally connecting my Team Services account to my Visual Studio IDE. What I mean by that is, remember I said that there was source code in there was work item tracking in there were builds in there. I will have access to all of that directly inside of my IDE. It's not just going to be cloning my repository. Now, cloning my repository is going to happen. So what I'm going to do now is tell it where on my hard drive I'd like it, and please go ahead and start cloning the repo. But again, it's more than that. I am literally taking that Visual Studio Team Services account and connecting it to my Visual Studio IDE. I'm going to show you a screen where I'll be able to see the build output. I'll be able to see the work items and bugs that are assigned to me. I'll be able to see everything that I would see from the website directly inside of my IDE. It's much more powerful than just cloning a repository, because everything that I need is still going to be available to me. And everything that I'm going to have to do with this Git repository will happen right here inside of Visual Studio. I won't actually have to leave to do anything. So in a moment here, it's going to start wiring it up. And you can actually see it on the right-hand side already. You can see my changes, my branches. You can also see that it has my builds and my work items. Now remember, I created a very specific branch to do this work. And I remember the first time I had to go check out another branch, I literally had to IM a friend of mine on Skype. I'm like, dude, I cloned the repo. I don't see what I'm supposed to be working. I was like, yeah, you got to check it out. And I'm like, well, how do I know which branches I can check? Oh, well, you got to do a git remote /v. I'm like, what the hell, man? I just need to get to work, right? And here I am doing all this crazy stuff. But now I can go to branches, click on this, see all my remotes, double click on it, and now I've checked out that remote branch so that I can do all my work in the init branch. So everything that I do from this point on will be in that branch only, okay? So what I'm going to do now is come back over here to home, and I am going to go ahead and create a new project. This project is going to be a normal web application, MVC, full framework. We'll call it end-to-end demo like we've done everything else, and go ahead and create it. From here, I'm now going to add unit tests. Like I said, I'm a big fan of unit tests and code coverage. And it's going to do what Visual Studio does best. It's going to give me a complete solution that if I were to build it right now, would run successfully. I'm a big fan of infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code is where you actually codify the definition of your environment such that instead of someone going into the Azure portal to create different assets and resources for you, you simply run your build, and your build spins up that environment for you like magic. Gone are the days of that operations guy running around with that magical thumb drive with all the magical scripts on it. And if that thing gets lost or he goes on vacation, you guys are waiting for him to get back, gone, right? Put that in source control and allow the tools to act on it for you. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how we can create those files from directly inside of Visual Studio. I'm not the biggest fan of our Azure portal, so I try everything I can not to have to go there. This is what I'm talking about. This tool set is going to allow me to do everything I need in Azure without ever actually having to see the portal itself. So how do I do that? I simply right-click on my solution. I come over here to add, and then I'm going to add a new project. And the project that I'm going to add is from the cloud section. I have this because I have the Azure SDK installed, and I want to create a resource group. And this resource group is going to contain my infrastructure as code. What it's going to produce for me is actually a couple of JSON files, because that's all they are. An ARM template is just a JSON file that describes the environment upon which I want to run my application. Here, it's letting me know that there's lots of different templates that I can choose from, and all I need is a web app. But if I needed Docker or I needed web with a SQL server, we already know how to do all that stuff for you. We know how to do a lot more than this, actually. So for example, if I were to come here, you can actually go to GitHub from within the IDE and pull in all these great templates of people who have built these architectures for applications that you want to deploy. But the one that we want, luckily, is right here in the box, so we're simply going to click on OK. What it's going to do is now add another project to my solution. You could also add a database project here. You could add mobile projects here. You want this to be the solution that defines everything that is for your application. You don't have to be one app or another. So here I have my web app, my test project, and now my infrastructure as code as well. So now, if I click on this, this is just a JSON file. Not everybody likes looking at JSON, but if you're comfortable, you can actually come in and you can actually just change it. So we'll make this an S3. Or you can use the navigation over here and find different attributes of it. And if you wanted to change this. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to change this. Let me go back here. And I think I'm going to change this one. If I can get this to work the way I want. So what I'm saying is I want the website name to be set to the host plan name. The host plan name happens to be a parameter that I can pass in from the outside. By making it flexible like that, I can use this exact same template and then pass in dev values, QA values, and production values without having to create 3 copies of this exact same file. So that's why the parameters make it so powerful. And what I'm saying is I want my website name and my host planning name to be the same thing. And I'm going to pass in the host planning name here in a moment. So one last thing that I want to do to prove that this is a new application and I haven't baked anything, let's go to the layout here. And then from the layout, I'm going to change it. And I'm going to change the app name, which is something that you would recognize from me. So we're just going to rub a little DevOps on this app and make it better. So now with that said, all I have to do now is go over here to Team Explorer, or I can click down here. It shows me the changes I've made, what repository I'm in, and even what branch I'm on. So I can always make sure I'm working in the right place. I click on this, and I can now see my commit. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a comment. Now what you would normally do is you would commit locally, commit locally, commit locally. Then you would either do a smashing of all your comments or a rebase to prove that I did all this cool code in one and commit, and it wasn't like 400 commits with mistakes in there. So you rewrite all your history and stuff. And then finally, you would push it to the remote, right? But I'm a man, so I'm going to push right to the remote in one step, right? So what I've done now is I've taken my code and I've just pushed it to the remote repository, which normally would be a horrible thing to do. But remember, I created my own branch of code. So this is harmless. The master branch is still pristine. There's nothing wrong with it. What's the next step here? For the Git users, you should know, what do I do next? If you're new to Git, some people have no idea how to get their code out of their branch and into the master branch. But what I like about Visual Studio Team Services, again, is it helps you figure it out. So if I were to click on this link here, it takes me to the actual branch that I was working on. And it's a little small here, so I'll zoom in for a second. But it actually shows you what you're supposed to be doing. Let me go back. Sorry. Go to my code. And it actually prompts me at the top there to actually create a new pull request. So that's the way that you get your code from your branch into another branch, is you do something called a pull request. That's where you ask your colleagues to review your code and basically give it an approval to move it into the master branch for you. Once it goes into the master branch, then the CI magic starts off that we created just a moment ago, okay? And speaking of CI magic, there's a couple things I want to do on that build before I create that pull request. So let's go back to the build and talk about that a little bit longer. So if I go back and edit my build, I want to show you some other aspects of it. One of which that I just dawned on me that I forgot to turn on, which is the trigger. I want there to be a continuous integration build. which means when that merge happens into master, I need this build to kick off, and I want it to make sure it works properly. Another thing that we have here are variables. The variables can actually be encrypted. Be very careful, because once you click this padlock and you save it, there is no getting that value back again. I learned the hard way because I forgot a password. Thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just unclick the padlock and I'll go see what the password was. Yeah, no, it doesn't work that way, right? Once it's in there, it's in there. There is no getting it out. So put it in OneNote or somewhere else really secure like that, and make sure that you keep that password with you. The other thing that's really nice here are the pools I talked about. I created my own. It's the default one, and it's that big monster machine. But we also give you 3 out of the box. So there's a hosted one that's running Windows in Visual Studio 2015. Then we have the Windows one at the bottom that's running Visual Studio 2017. Then we have a Linux one in the middle that is literally running Linux. It has Docker tools on it and everything, ready to help you start doing some really cool stuff. But obviously you want to use my own. And then what you can also do is you can decide how many of these builds you want to keep so that we don't run out of hard drive space. And we also have a history here. So if I go back over here and I save this guy, you're going to be able to see that every save actually has a record in here, and I can compare them and see, did someone break the build by accident, or was it the actual code that actually broke the build definition? So now that I have that, I can finally go over and complete my pull request. So what I'm going to do now is do exactly what it said, create myself a pull request. A pull request collects all my changes for that particular branch, allows me to add additional people if I wanted to, and if you'll notice down here, it actually shows me all the work items that I was working on in that branch. That information gets carried forward for me from my branch to my pull request to my build to my release. It's really cool how that whole thread of connected happens for you. So what we're going to do now is create a pull request. At this point, my team members would be notified. They would be able to come in and look at every change that I made and even have a conversation about this particular pull request. If they need me to go back in and change something, they can leave me a comment. We can debate that. I can go back in, commit more changes to this particular PR, and once we're happy with it, they would complete it and it would merge itself into master, right? So it's a really nice process here to be able to have a communication over what you're doing. I'm going to go ahead and approve this and complete it. Notice here that it's actually saying, hey, Donovan, I know that you were working on these particular work items, so I'm going to carry that forward for you. And oh, by the way, you should go delete this branch, right? You're done with it. You've already done the work. You've completed it. Let's not have it just populating all over the place. We're actually going to help you go clean up after yourself to make sure that your branches don't get out of control. So all I have to do now is simply complete the merge. Now, if I move fast enough, what I should be able to do is get to the build that is actually running right now because I set up continuous integration. And as we can see, the build is running. By simply clicking on the name of the build, I should be able to see that the build has been picked up by my agent and it's already halfway done. There's one other thing I'd like to tell you about our build that I skipped over, which is the task library, which I'm very, very proud of. This task library is a completely open source. Every task that we write at Microsoft, we put in GitHub so that you can see exactly how we wrote it. Why do that? Because we want you to trust it, and we also want you to be able to use those as examples when you go and write your own. Because you're allowed to write your own task for the system as well. It's not closed. But look how many there are in there. There are so many in here that we actually had to implement search because people couldn't find what they were looking for. Every task you need to get to Azure is in here. Cordova, Xamarin, Docker. If you want to use Slack or GitHub or all sorts of different stuff, you can actually use all of it right out of the box. No installation, no configuration. If you don't see what you need in here, you either write your own or you go to our marketplace. Our marketplace is where competitors, partners, individuals have gone and written lots of different extensions that you can now add to your team services account to add more value that might not be there out of the box. There's thousands and thousands of these. Don't let that little scroll bar fool you. When you get to the bottom, it just keeps loading more and more and more of these. So I would come here and search first. If you don't see what you need, go ahead and write it yourself, and then you can become popular. Because there's one of the most popular extensions is written by an individual named Colin, which every one of us has been downloading. It's a really good extension. So it's a good way to actually make a name for yourself as well. So now that I have my build all done, if I go back to my summary, I should see hopefully that it has completed. So now that it's completed, I can go back and I can look at the summary of this. Now the summary is going to have a lot of valuable information. For example, my head's going to cover some of it, but here you have the test results, you have the code coverage, and over there on the left-hand side, you can see all of the all of the work items that we actually were working on. I used to work at Compaq Computers. Does anyone remember Compaq Computers? A few of you guys? Yeah, so all the old people do. Right, so The young people, it's called HP now, right? For those who don't remember Compact. But when I was working there, I remember I would fix a bug, and then the QA person would come to me and say, hey, Donovan, what build is that bug fix in? Well, I fixed it a week ago. I have no idea what build the bug fix is. And so here I am spending an hour trying to go back and figure out what build could this fix possibly be in. But what's really interesting is that if you'll notice, all the work items that I selected are now attached to the build itself. The build also stamps the work items and says, it was fixed or resolved in this particular build. So the QA person can actually go to the bug that they're interested in, and it will show them, Donovan fixed it on this date, and this is the build that you need to go and get. We never have to talk to each other again, right? This is awesome. Break down the walls of communication. Right. So the other thing that's really cool, like I said, my head is kind of covering it, is down here at the bottom. You remember we said, you have a project. I want to make you a repository. It gave me a repository and said, let me help you make a build. I made a build and it helped me create my work. It helped me create my branch. It told me to do a pull request. And now that I have a successful build, it's telling me, let's go create a release for you. It's guiding you through the process. There's no, what do I go through next? What do I do next? Nope, we're telling you, just create a release next. Because we have a positive output of our build. We want to take that and we actually want to start deploying it for you. This is our new editor. So if you go back to your office and you start playing with this, you get to this editor screen, it will not look like this. I started playing with the preview bits, and I'll show you how you can start playing with them as well, okay? But this is the new editor, which I love. It's very similar to our build system. It works on Linux, Mac, and on Windows. It has templates that you can use that come right out of the box. I happen to want to use this template here. So what I have here is an environment, and I'm going to change this environment to dev, which makes more sense for me. And if I click on this, it actually already knows how to deploy a web app. All I have to do is come in here and wire it up to my Azure account. So here it's going to list for me all my Azure subscriptions. And all I have to do is choose the subscription that I want and click on Authorize. If you guys had been using VSO, back when it was called VSO as long as I have, you would be clapping your butts off right now at how easy that was. This used to be extremely, extremely difficult. How many of you guys remember going into Azure and figuring out what your tenant ID was and your service principal ID was and all that other stuff? We're the guys who used to walk uphill both ways in the snow with no shoes on so that you guys could have this button and you don't even appreciate it. The button is awesome. That used to be really hard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start using something called variables. I talked about them a little bit earlier, but I'm going to use one here too, because I want my app service name to be a variable that I can change from one environment to the next. And I'm basically going to use one called website name. So because I started with a $sign and I put it in parentheses, it now understands that that is a variable that I can change anytime that I want. Now that's it. This is actually configured to be able to deploy my web application. But where is it going to deploy it? We need the infrastructure upon which it's going to deploy this particular item. And that's why I created that project inside of Visual Studio. And we're going to leverage that right now. I'm going to add a new task here. And the task that I'm going to add is going to be just like it was inside of Visual Studio. It's the resource group. I need this to happen first. And what I'm going to do now is basically use the exact same subscription that I configured on the last task for this task. I want the resource group to also match my website name. The location, it can be of any of the 40 regions we have in Azure. And why not go ahead and pick West Europe? Now I need to actually give it the JSON files that we created. So here it's asking for a template. I don't have to remember the name. I don't have to remember the path. I can simply click on Browse. It'll show me the contents of my build, and I can simply choose the file that I need, which is this website. And then it also has template parameters. If some of the parameters are hard-coded, I can actually put them inside of this second file that I'm going to select here. But it doesn't stop me from overriding those. So even though I've given it this file, I can still say, you know what? I want that host planning name to actually equal the website variable that I'm going to define here in just a second. One other thing that I want to do here before I move off is go to my agent and tell it I also want you to use my big giant agent machine. But if I wanted to, I could use any of the hosted agents as well. Now that I have that set, let's go and create that variable that I'm going to need. So here I have a screen that shows me all my variables and at what scope they exist. If I were to come over here and create a new variable, let's call it website name, I can leave it at the release level, which means this now would apply to all of them with whatever value that I get. Or I can go ahead and scope it to just my dev environment, and then I'll call this end-to-end demo D for development or for dev. Okay? Now I have an entire pipeline environment created, and now all I want to do is clone this because I need more than just dev. I also need QA. And in addition to the tasks that I had in QA, I also want to have an approver. This is one of the things that makes our release system so much different from our build system. The concept of an approver. As the code is moving from one environment to the next, you don't want human beings touching it, but you do want human beings to be able to say, should it continue or not? And that's what we're doing right now. It will automatically be deployed to dev. Your dev team will be able to have a chance to go and make sure it integrates correctly, but then your QA person is waiting for that build to come into their QA environment. But they don't want every CI build that gets produced, because if they're in the middle of testing, if they were to take a new build, it would invalidate their test results. So by making the QA lead the guardian of that environment, they get to choose when and if that code enters their environment. So what I'm going to do is basically put myself here as an approver. So let's just put D Brown. And if I wanted to, I could put multiple people. I could put people and groups. It's a really powerful system. And as you'll notice, there's an icon on the outside, which means I can have approvers on the outside as well. So I might put my QA lead again as the post-deployment approver. That way, if they do manual testing, exploratory testing, and some other type of testing and find lots of bugs or a showstopper, they can actually kill the release in QA and not have it try to go downstream any further. So it's a really powerful concept of having approvers inside of your release. So now that I have that set up, I can actually go ahead and clone this one as well. And we're just simply going to call this one production. As you'll notice, I created one template of the deployment and I duplicated it over and over again. You want to do the exact same thing in every single environment. You don't want to do something new for the first time in production, because the only time you'll know if it works or not is the first time you deploy it in production, which would be a bad thing. You want to test it in dev, test it in QA, have confidence that it's going to work before you go off and you deploy it into your production environment. Testing is the only exception. You don't always want to test inside of your production environment. Lots of us are doing it nowadays, but if you want to test only in QA, you can come here and add an additional task. We're going to add a task for testing, and we could run coded UI tests, Selenium tests, performance, web test, all kinds of fun stuff. I'm just going to add a web performance test here. That's going to run after the site has been deployed. I'm going to use another variable here for the website URL. Here. But now we got to make sure, where do I get that value from? Because what I want is I need to know the name of the website that was deployed in the previous step. And what I'm going to do is actually have that task set this variable so that I can use it in a later one. So it's very flexible to be able to have the tasks communicate with each other. So down here at the bottom, I can simply say, I want you to actually set a value called website URL that then the other guy is actually going to be able to use so that they can share information. That way, if I were to change that website URL parameter, that would then trickle down all the way through here and I wouldn't have to change anything else. So it's a really flexible system. So with that, I can now save it. I have just created an entire pipeline from dev, QA, into prod. Now, it's set up to do continuous deployment, which means as soon as I check in code, it's going to trigger my build. As soon as my build is done, it's going to trigger the release, and the release is going to start moving. But you can also start a release manually, which is what I'm going to do here. Why might I want to do this? Let's say, for example, you deployed the latest and greatest version of your code. I put greatest in quotes there, because when you push it out there, it wasn't so great, right? And you would just do anything to get the old code back onto that machine. What you can do is come in here, use this drop down, find the build that you know is good, and simply select it and start the release over again, and it will then put that known good environment back where it was supposed to be. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do now. So when I go ahead and queue this up, if I race over here, I want to show you some cool things about our release pipeline. First thing I want to show you is the fact that it has lots of valuable information in it. Not only does it show you all three environments and their progress, I can watch them in real time just like I did with my build system. I can also go over here to my work items, and as I promised, those work items that were in my branch have carried all the way over into my release so that I can see exactly when they were actually released. There's this beautiful thread that gets built for you when you use all the tools from the same vendor. If you were using Jira and Bitbucket and Jenkins and all these other vendors, you would not have this level of traceability, right? Even with all the hooks that they have in and out, getting this type of visibility is almost impossible, which is one of the benefits of using a tool like ours. One other thing that we offer are dashboards. So let me show you what those look like. So while our release is running, we'll go play with dashboards. I've just pinned that release definition to my dashboard. I can also do the same thing with my build. So if I go back over to my build, use this menu here, and say add you to my overview dashboard, I can now go back to my dashboard here, and I will actually see that it has two new tiles on it. One tile for my build, and one tile for my release. I can then edit this and decide I want to move this one up here. I'm going to take my build and put it over here, and I'll take my work item stuff and put it over here. If I don't see the tile that I want, I can click on the Add button, and here I have all these different widgets that come out of the box that allow me to add new functionality and widgets to my dashboard. If I don't see the dashboard widget that I want, I can write my own, or I can go to the extension gallery, filtered just for extensions that have widgets in them. So I can do application insights and bring all that data into my actual dashboard inside of Visual Studio Team Services. So I don't have to go to Azure for one thing and Hockey App for another thing and then Visual Studio Team Services for another thing. Go to Visual Studio Team Services, build a rich dashboard that collects all the information that you need in one central place. So what we're going to do now is get rid of this. And we're going to go back over here now and go ahead and save our changes. These tiles are interactive. I can actually come over here and click on release 1 of this tile, and it will jump me into the release that I was just working on so that I can see if it's moving along or not. So while that's moving, what I want to show to you is that inside of my Azure account, new stuff has started to happen. So if I go ahead and refresh this, you can see I now have that resource group. I didn't have to come here to create it, but if I then drill down inside of this resource group, you're going to see all the assets that were created for me by this particular ARM template. It created a place for my application insight, so I can actually have custom telemetry to make sure that I delivered value. I can also see the website that I actually created for me. And this is the website it should be deploying into at this very moment. So what I want to do is go back and verify real quick that my release is done. Let me close this tab here. Perfect. So it says that it's succeeded, but it has not gone into QA yet. What it's doing now is it's basically waiting for me to approve that it could go into QA. But before I do that, I should at least verify that the website itself actually comes up. Every time a developer makes changes, their changes are automatically going to go into this environment without them having to do anything but focus on committing the code. They focus on delivering value, and we let the tool chain do the rest. Now that demo took me about 30 minutes to do. I'm going to show you a shortcut. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things to do. You just saw me go from 0 to an entire DevOps pipeline in about half an hour. It doesn't take that long. Instead, you can go and get to PowerShell. Don't worry if you're afraid of PowerShell. I didn't used to like PowerShell either, but I'm starting to re-embrace the PowerShell and the command line. I'm a Visual Studio developer. My instinct is to right-click on everything. But when you understand how powerful this can be, it's really cool stuff. So what I'm going to do now is show you one of my pet projects. How many of you guys have ever seen a tool called Yeoman? All right, Yeoman generates files for you, but I'm a DevOps guy, so files weren't enough. I need an entire DevOps pipeline. I need a CI build, I need a continuous delivery, I need everything. I essentially need what I just did for you in half an hour. So what you can do here, instead of doing what I did, is basically just answer a few questions. I want you to use that particular site. I need you to give you a password so that you know how to access my particular account. It's then going to go query, and it shows you the exact same things I showed you earlier. I'll still use default. I can do .NET Core, full .NET, Node.js, or Java. The only reason these are the only 4 languages is because these are the only 4 languages I know. Okay? So if you guys wanted to do PHP or Golang or some other language, give me a pull request, because this is all open source in GitHub right now, and we can all go and make this a lot cooler than it is already. So let's just do .NET Full, because that's what we did a second ago. We'll call it ASP.NET Demo, and I'm going to choose App Service, which is where I'm going to deploy. Had I chosen Java or Node.js, it would actually show me Docker and all these other cool options. But because I'm doing .NET Full, it only wants to go to App Service. And then I tell it which project or which account I want it to actually go off and use for my Azure account. So now what it's actually doing is it's doing everything that I just did for you, but it's doing it for me automatically. It's going to Team Services right now and actually creating a new team project. Once the team project is created, it clones the repo down to my hard drive for me. I asked it to actually do the entire pipeline, including code. So in a moment, it's actually going to give me a sample project that I can use. If you already have a team project and you already have source code, you can actually tell the tool, just give me the pipeline. And all it'll do is create the CI and the CD build and release for you, and it won't give you any source code. But if you ask it this way, it goes off and creates everything for you in just a matter of seconds. And now all I have to do as a developer is a git push into my repository, and all that magic I talked about a moment ago just starts to happen. So right now it's committing locally. I can go over into this folder and I can push it. It's now pushing it to the project that it just created, and a CI build is automatically going to get kicked off. So just imagine how quickly you can go back to work on Monday and actually enable DevOps for your company. You don't have to do the 30 minutes that I just did. You can actually do the 4 minutes that I just did instead. Now, another thing that I want to show you here is another pet project of mine. Once I learned about EO Team, I really got excited about PowerShell. And I said, I don't want to have to leave PowerShell now that I have a pipeline to go and do approvals, check the status of my build, go and actually look at the status of my release. I want to be able to automate it and script it using PowerShell. So what I did is I created a PowerShell module called Team that has all of these commandlets in it that you can basically just go and download into PowerShell. This is also open source. I've already accepted pull requests on this. So if it doesn't do everything that you want it to do, just give me a pull request and we can make it go do that for you. But some of the things that I can do now is I can say, why don't you show me all of the projects that are inside of my team services account? And it shows me the one that I created manually and the one that was just created for us as part of using Yo Team. In addition to that, the majority of these commands need to know what project you're working on. And instead of you having to pass it as a parameter, you can simply tab through all of the different accounts that you have, and it'll pick whichever one that you want and set that as the default project. At this point, any questions that I ask are going to be scoped to that particular item. So if I say, get me a build, it'll show me that you already had a build and it's completed already. If that build had failed, what I could actually do is say, why don't you give me that build, and using normal PowerShell, pipe it to get build log, and then it'll dump the entire log for you right here to the screen so that you can go back in and analyze exactly what happened to your particular build. But because my build is done, what should have happened? I should have had a release created, right? So if I were to go back now and say get release, what should happen is we should see that there's actually a release running. But let's do something a little bit cooler than that. Let's actually see where it is in the release pipeline. And as you can see, I've already successfully gone through the dev environment, and now I'm in the QA environment. And just like before, it's waiting for my approval. So if I were to come back here now and actually ask it to get approval, it's going to show me that I actually have an approval waiting for me right now. Just think of the level of automation that we can do now. We can have DevOps bots actually watching our repositories and helping us decide using cognitive services if I should go ahead and approve this or not, easing the burden on us as Microsoft employees, as everyone's doing DevOps inside of the world. Now, what's really cool is I can take this, I can pipe it to set approval, and when I do that, I can actually choose the status that I want, and I can cycle through all the available statuses. If I say approve, it will actually approve this, and now that thing is actually running off inside of my QA environment as well. To prove that all this is real, I can just go ahead and say start. Let's go here, go ASP demo. And now you're going to see that all the stuff was actually created for us just like it was before. I have my build definition here. This is the exact same build definition that I created by hand, now being created for us automatically. The reason that I show you this is because there is no excuse for any of you to go back to work on Monday and not start doing this. The one question that I get asked the most that drives me freaking nuts is, Donovan, how can I go get permission to do this? You don't need permission to do this. It is your job. They hired you to do the right thing for your company. They hired you to continuously deliver value. How can you do that if you're not implementing this? If you're not doing this, shame on you, because it only takes you 4 minutes to do it, right? So please, go back to work on Monday. Do not look for anyone's permission. Just go implement this. Okay, guys? Okay, guys? Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. And 2 minutes over, 2 minutes to spare. But I'm done. So, all right. So I will stand outside and I'll answer any questions that people have so that we can have this room ready for the next speaker. All right, guys. See ya. Thank you. My pleasure.